We're going to begin this assignment looking at these three questions that are here as we study African geography. Here are the terms that are listed in the AP framework. There is a reference in this source to the Dark Continent. The Dark Continent, as mentioned before, was a theory among Europeans that Africa was a continent with no civilization and no contribution to society or to humanity. This definitely is a biased interpretation. The learning objectives from the AP framework. You're to have an understanding of the geography and how the geography dictates where people live and how they live. These are the 5 themes in geography. I'm not really going to focus too much on these, but as we take a look at movement of certain people, for example, the Bantu people, different regions in Africa are going to develop differently, and occasionally you will see human interaction, but it really all depends on the location. You're going to complete this particular sheet right here, some basic information like the climate zones, and occasionally I'm going to ask you to guess. For example, this question right here, crucial. Make a guess about the development of Africa. And you want to focus on the different regions because the different regions are going to, again, using the themes of geography, determine how any land mass is developed. Here we're looking at all of the oceans and seas. Some of these are going to be crucial. For example, the Nile River, which will be crucial for the Egyptian Empire. Here we're looking at the Atlantic Ocean. Keep in mind that this region is going to be crucial for the transatlantic slave trade. The Indian Ocean and this particular region right here with the Swahili coast will be crucial for African trade. This image is a zoomed in version looking at some of the areas. For example, mentioned here, people traded livestock, and that is really a result of this particular area because this desert area would not make that livestock trade to be as easy considering it is in a desert climate. On the back of the sheet, we're going to start looking at some of these empires and how these empires are going to develop. Some notes from some of the sources. There's a debate about whether or not Africa plays a role in world history. The first remains, human remains with Lucy. Usually Africa gets questioned with regard to its contribution to world history, which is why people will look at in later units, W.E.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, are going to try to challenge that argument. And notice how here they're really looking at Egypt, because Europeans always looked at Egypt as an example of high civilization. They would also argue that the Egyptians were not African, and that's where you get into a biased interpretation of history. Some would even argue potentially racist. This piece is trying to argue the success of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai as high civilization examples. So if we're looking at Africa, Egypt, and this particular region, these empires are here. So what they're trying to do in this reading is trying to dispute that belief with regard to Africa being the Dark Continent. Once again, we see evidence from Ghana and its contribution. The region we're looking at here, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, are in this particular portion. They're known as the Sudanic empires. And here we see some images that are from the African American Studies framework. This image here, this is straight out of the framework. Now we're transitioning to some of the points that are made in the textbook, which kind of are on the same theme. The varied landscape, the rainforest, the large desert, all of these variables are going to determine the development of African tribes as well as empires. This timeline addresses some of the issues that we will address later on. I'm circling the empires that we will start to address in later classes. And I did mention Lucy, where you're seeing some of the first human remains recorded in human history. And what I'm doing here is trying to look at where the Bantu people are located, which would be in this region. And then, of course, we already mentioned these empires. And again, it's all about geography that's going to determine the development overall of Africa. These are the terms you have to have an understanding of for the course for this particular unit, which addresses some of these particular points. We talked about the geography, the ocean seas, population centers, and some of the empires that were discussed. And this is the closure section.